Welcome to the Health Commune podcast, where we simplify health and well being, including women's health, motherhood, and everything in between. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Samira Hussaini, and today's episode is a very special one, something that I am very excited about. We're going to talk about something that is so invaluable for every new parent, expecting parent, and even for healthcare professionals. I'm talking about the breastfeeding journey. And to talk about this important topic, we have with us Adhunika Prakash, who is the founder and CEO of Breastfeeding Support for Indian Mothers, someone who's helped so many breastfeeding women in their journey. Adhunika is also the author of an internationally best-selling book called The Breast Portion, which is all you need to know about breastfeeding from the Indian perspective, and the co-author of another international bestseller called The Shakti Awakening. Welcome, Adhunika. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Samira, for this opportunity.
Let me tell you, Adhunika, I am personally a huge fan of your work. And your book, The Breast Portion, is something that I still refer to as a mother. I am a mother to a 1-year-old. And every time I reach a roadblock in my breastfeeding journey, I go back to your book and read it up. And there are answers to all the problems in your book.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that because, when I was writing the book, I was being very mindful about what part we can cover and how much we can cover. So I'm really happy to hear that you're still referring to the book when your child is a year old.
Absolutely. It is so helpful.
So wonderful to hear that.
So, Adhunika, before we dive into the podcast and we'll have this amazing, interesting conversations, can you please tell us a little bit about your journey as a lactation consultant and in this whole journey of breastfeeding, how you've helped people?
So thank you so much, Samita, for this opportunity. Like I already mentioned, it's an honor to be here and to be talking about my journey. So a little bit about myself. Growing up, I was really, falling sick very often. And when I got pregnant, I really wanted to understand what can I do to make sure that my child doesn't fall sick that often. And time and again, it would all come back to, breastfeed the baby, breastfeed the baby. It helps in the immunity of the child long term. So I was determined to breastfeed. I read about breastfeeding as much as I could. But close to 7, like I read about everything, but at 7 months of age is when I felt really lonely. And I was like, why is nobody talking about, how breastfeeding is important for the mother and the baby? And yet nobody's talking about how difficult it is for the mother to breastfeed.
True.
So at that point of time, I was actually literally, with no exaggeration, I was crying at nights because I felt so lonely during. Also, I was living in another country, so I didn't really have many cousins, friends, relatives, colleagues. No one that I could really, talk to, and I was one of the first to have a child. So there were no cousins also.
Right.
So I was literally crying at night that this is so tough because it was like the 7th month regression, the sleep regression, and I had barely slept. And because I was living in another country, I had no support. I didn't have, a house help or a cook or a nanny. I didn't have anyone. So I was exhausted. And that's when I actually joined an Irish group because I was in Ireland then. And from there on, like my whole perspective towards breastfeeding changed only because I received support. So
Right.
I had educated myself on breastfeeding and how important it is, but just joining a community of women who were also on this arduous path, right? Because sometimes I used to wonder, why have I chosen this for myself? Like, why is no one talking about it? How hard it is, and why have I taken this decision? So just being in the presence of those wonderful ladies, albeit online, I felt like, okay, I'm not completely crazy. And, this is, there are other women also taking this path. So that's when I actually joined this group. And then a few months later, I created one for Pune moms, incidentally, because most of my life has been spent in Pune. And then I realized that a lot of mothers from all across, the country started joining in. So then the group was rechristened to Breastfeeding Support for Indian, mothers. Up until then, it was Pune moms. And earlier, I had started calling my friends, and I was on international calls talking to my friends for like 1.5 hours, counseling them on how to breastfeed. And, I started sending mails. And then I started doing all of that work in the group itself. So little known facts about breastfeeding, like I would feel that if a mother knew this, then she would want to breastfeed. If she had this fact with her, then she would want to breastfeed. So all of those little known facts, how breastfeeding works, supply and demand, and all of that information I started sharing with the mothers on that community.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of time, now we've had close to 1.5 lakh women on the breastfeeding group now.
Wow, that's quite a
And
number.
it was very, very slow and very gradual. It was not like overnight that we reached that number. And in 2019, we got recognized by Facebook as one of the top 5 Facebook communities across the world. That gave us access to some funding actually.
Oh.
And with the use of that funding, we created a lactation course.
Mhm.
Because the course that I had done was an American one, and all of the other courses that I wanted to attend in India at that point of time required me to step away from my child.
Right.
And and then we designed this course, which was specifically from the perspective of like Indian, context.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are a lot of things that we do differently from every other nation, right? Like from the US or from Ireland or UK. So there was a lot of cultural context in the course, and we've designed it being mindful of, the extended family support system and how sometimes while it can be supportive and sometimes it can also be detrimental to the breastfeeding relationship. So
Right.
keeping all of that in mind, and how frequently antibiotics are prescribed in our country as compared to any other possibly European nation. So keeping all that in mind, this course was designed for the Indian context specifically.
Right.
So that's really been our story. And, it really keeps me going when I feel that even if I can help one mother on a breastfeeding journey, then I must just keep going on, for as long as I can, whatever little impact that I can make. So just keep going there. And all of our team is completely volunteer. So they're all mothers, who also felt helpless at some point of time where they felt, oh, I wish I had the support, or I wish someone would have guided me. So all our team of volunteers are these mothers itself who have breastfed, and they want to help other mothers with breastfeeding.
Lovely, lovely. I'll tell you something. You've not helped just one, because you have helped so many people, me included. This is such a wonderful.
But honestly,
thing.
I also think that, after doing this work for more than a decade,
Mhm.
I literally cannot help someone who does not want to receive that help.
Right. It's a two-way
So it 100% is. And that's why we really call our course Lactation Enabler and not Counselor, because we can only enable how much the other person wants to do. So if I come and support you, but you don't want to receive that support, there's nothing much I can do about it, right?
Right.
I can provide you with all of the information required for you to breastfeed. Like my determination to breastfeed comes with my own health struggles and, me understanding the importance of why breastfeeding should be done. But someone who's not really had like possibly a, poor health journey growing up, and who doesn't really think too much about consuming processed foods and things like, they may not be so passionate or so involved in providing that. They may be like, okay, everyone has given this, why should I bother? Depends on the kind of support system you have. A lot of mothers, even till date, they don't have help at home. And when they have to manage everything at home along with feeding their child, it's really not feasible for a mother to accomplish all of that and breastfeed.
Right.
So it really is a byproduct of so many things, whether you want to breastfeed and whether you're able to breastfeed even.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's amazing. And I think your journey is also very incredible and inspiring for so many people. So now that we begin with the podcast, I wanted to start with the very basic question, and everything that, like, a question that everyone wants to know, that is, how early can or should a breastfeeding mother breastfeed her child? And why are the first 48 hours that they say is so important, the golden period that everyone talks about? So can you just tell us about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to take that one step further back.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of mothers, they believe, or maybe they're made to believe, that if they give birth to a cesarean, then they're not going to have milk.
I've heard
So
that.
first I want to debunk that myth that the milk production, it begins during pregnancy itself, right? The ducts start getting formed, and as pregnancy progresses, all mothers, one of the signs is also that your breasts start to change in size, or maybe the size, how much it increases, it varies, but it usually is a sign that your breast starts developing. And milk production also begins during pregnancy. So whether you have a birth, which is vaginal, or whether it is through a C-section, you are going to have milk, when the baby is born.
Right.
And the baby actually should be fed within the first hour,
Mhm.
after the birth of the baby, because the baby actually is seeking that comfort. So it's not really only about feeding the baby, it's even about the baby being able to smell the mother, the baby being able to feel the chest to chest contact, and the way the body is stabilizing to the heartbeat of the mother.
Right.
The baby is even co-regulating the temperature with the mother. So irrespective of the type of birth, the mother is going to have milk, and in case the mother is separated from the child for whatever medical procedures, if any,
Mhm.
which can ideally also be done with the child being kept skin to skin. But in extreme cases, if there has to be mother and child separation, the child should not be kept on a bed. The child should be kept in close proximity to any human, because the heartbeat, the temperature, everything is co-regulated, because the human child is really not that evolved that it can survive, it just in absence of support or a care provider. So
Yeah.
the first 48 hours, of course, definitely, but most importantly, the first 1 or 2 hours, the
Mm.
baby should get its first feed. It helps in the regulation of the sugar. It helps in regulation, like I said, of the temperature of the baby. The everything fits in just like a puzzle. So again, I'm going to go one step back, right? But how are we supposed to know this? Because in a lot of hospitals, this is not being practiced. The golden hour, right? The hour after the baby is born, the baby is supposed to be kept skin to skin, and the baby
Yeah.
is supposed to get milk. So I think what is more important is, and I remember this very distinctly, during my first pregnancy, I've always been a very fit and active person, and I was exercising all through. And what bothered me most was, when am I going to lose the weight that I've gained?
I think everyone is worried about that.
So, we are more fixated on how we're going to lose the weight. But we're not living in villages anymore. We're all living in nuclear setups.
Yes.
So there's no grandmother, dadi, nani, there's no, sister-in-law. And unfortunately, the previous generation, they were misinformed by medical professionals, because medical professionals in that generation were educated about breastfeeding by formula manufacturers.
Right.
Right? So they themselves don't have accurate information about breastfeeding. And that was trickled down to our parents' generation. So if the baby was feeding often, our parents' generation did give a bottle. So the same thing comes down to us, right? Because they're like, oh, the baby is feeding often. You're not making enough milk. Just give a bottle. So it's really important to educate yourself about how breastfeeding works.
No, that's
before the
exactly what
baby
I was
comes
going to
around.
ask you, because personally, Adharika, I have recently I delivered a baby like a year back, and a very common thing in India is they say in the hospitals nowadays that you're not getting enough milk, so they give a top up of formula milk. So is that something that should be considered? They check the blood sugar level of the baby and they say, oh no, you should give a formula milk. Start with formula milk. What do you have to say
Yeah.
about it?
So what happened? This has also happened with my oldest. This hypoglycemia, which is also called low blood sugars,
Right.
was because the child was separated from the mother.
Okay.
Because the child is not able to regulate itself,
Right.
and it recognizes the mother. So that is what causes the low blood sugar.
Oh.
And if the procedure that has to be done can be done after the first feed is done by the baby, or can be done with the baby kept on top of the mother's chest, with some support, then the child is not going to need that top up.
So even the skin to skin would also make a lot of a difference, even if the child is not breastfed.
So yeah, so in mother-friendly hospitals, if the child can be kept skin to skin, all the medical procedures can be done while the child is kept on the chest.
Okay.
Of course, you have to make sure that the baby's not going to fall, but it's not going to.
Right.
So finish that first feed within the first hour. And in my first birth, I distinctly remember it was in a hospital in Ireland. Okay, and they were waiting for the OT to get available.
Right.
So why didn't they let me feed the baby until then? Right. And I wanted to feed the baby. And after a few hours, obviously the child's sugar levels are going to drop, because the child has not consumed anything in so many hours.
True.
So the first priority really needs to be to feed the baby first.
Yeah.
And if, of course, we cannot and we shouldn't expect that the mother's health be in risk. So if possible, get the procedure done with the child chest to chest. If not possible, finish the feed and then do the procedure. There are so many ways if you want to enable the mother and child year. There are many ways to do that. So coming back to your first question, which was, it's very important to feed within the first hour, and irrespective of the type of birth, whether it's vaginal or cesarean, you can feed the baby. There is something that happens with a cesarean, which is sometimes, and not always, not 100% of the times, is that the mature milk, which is when your breast swells up, and in the first pregnancy, it can also cause a lot of discomfort. In some cases, that mature milk coming in can be delayed.
Okay.
But
That's not a problem.
even until then, if you're going to continue feeding the baby, it's fine.
Okay.
So every 2 hours, the baby needs to be fed. And if you're going to be feeding the baby every 2 hours, there's going to be no urgency to, give formula.
Right. That makes sense. That actually makes sense.
The proteins that are there in formula are very different from the proteins that are there in breast milk. So the way it is digested, the amount of added sugars that are there in formula, even till date, it's not changed. So how formula is going to get processed versus how breast milk gets processed is different. I think that's why we need ourselves to get educated, because we don't have, our dadis and nanis and bhabis and all of that to help us with breastfeeding. So we can only arm ourselves with knowledge and take that decision, once we have educated ourselves.
Right. That makes so much sense. That actually makes sense. Adinaka, can you tell us a little bit about how realistically breastfeeding looks in the initial few weeks? Because I remember sitting for hours and hours together. Sometimes I used to feed my baby, and then again after 10 minutes, my child used to cry for a feed. So is that common? What happens in the first few weeks? What are the challenges in the first few weeks while breastfeeding?
So, the first few weeks, and especially more so with the first child, the mother is also a student.
Yeah.
The child is also a student, so both the mother and the baby are learning to breastfeed. And honestly speaking, the mother is also tense because she wants us to work out.
Yes.
So the mother's also tense, and the child can sense that tension as well. And the child also reflects the same anxiety that the mother is having. So it's completely normal for the child to feed very often. And in fact, for the first 2 weeks, a child is to be breastfed every 2 hours until it reaches its birth weight. So what you need to do is, until the birth weight, again, the birth weight when measured on the same scale. Right? Because if you go and measure yourself in the gym and then again you come back and you measure yourself at home, you'll see that there's a difference in calibration.
Yes.
So it's important that the child is measured on the same weighing scale, because typically what happens is that the birth weight is calculated at the pediatrician or the hospital, and the subsequent weights are measured in the pediatrician's office.
Yes, that's right.
So even that is a problem. Ideally, it has to be measured on the same scale.
So it's standardized.
Yeah, and otherwise, what can happen sometimes is that there might be a perceived weight loss and not an actual weight loss.
Right.
Because the calibration of two machines are different, and then the doctor could be like, you're not making enough milk, only because of the calibration of the machines being different. And within the pediatrician's office also, there are two different machines. So many things like that, right? So it's important to really feed your baby every 2 hours, and most importantly, figure out how to attempt a deep latch, because breastfeeding is getting established. And just a baby suckling at the breast is not necessary that the baby is getting milk. So it's important for the baby to understand how to latch onto the breast, how to transfer milk. And then after that, tracking the wet and dirty nappy count is, and makes the mother feel a bit more confident. And that she can do even without the weighing scale from home.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, because personally, as a new mother, one fear that I had was I producing enough of milk? And second is my child getting enough of milk? And this fear is in so many mothers, almost all new mothers. So is there any way to find out if the child is being fed adequately? And how does the supply demand work of the child and the breast milk?
Yeah. So like I was saying, there is something called as the initial milk called the colostrum, right? And the colostrum doesn't really make your breast feel like watermelons. Okay, that's before the milk increases in volume. I'm saying increases in volume and not milk comes in.
Yeah.
Because milk comes in is very deceptive. It can make people feel that there is no milk before that.
Right.
So when the milk comes in, or the mature milk increases in volume, at that point of time, the nappy count increases. But until then, So per day, so if the child is a day old, the child is expected to have a minimum of one pee and one poop.
Okay, one pee and
And
one poop.
second day is two pees and two poops. Third day
Okay.
is three pees and three poops. And then the poop has to become from that very tarry black color meconium.
Mm-hmm.
Very gradually has to transition to very mustard yellow, grainy poop.
Okay.
You're not able to go to the doctor's or pediatrician's office, and you don't want to go there with such a tiny little thing, right?
Yes.
Track the wet and the dirty nappy count. That's all that one needs to do. So
Hmm.
until the milk increases in volume, that can happen anywhere between the third or fifth day. And after that, the child needs to be having a minimum of 6 P's.
Okay, in a day,
Yeah, in over 24 hours.
24 hours. Okay.
Yeah. So over 24 hours, the child needs to be having at least 6 P's. That is the bare minimum.
Okay.
That is just enough. Ideally, the child should be peeing 8 to 10 times. Ideally.
But
But
the
before you
worst
press
or
the
the
panic,
least.
before you press the panic button and you're still figuring out breastfeeding, how to relax and attempt a deep latch. So in those circumstances, you can be kind to yourself if the child is still getting minimum 6 P's. And meanwhile, you're still fixing on improving the latch and your positioning so that the baby starts getting more milk.
Okay. All right. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
and like I said, in cesarean, sometimes it can take a little bit more for some, not all. Again, the duration can be delayed sometimes. But even then, if the child is getting colostrum, which is the initial milk, it should suffice.
Okay, great. So then, in that case, if like a mother is expecting or a mother is delivered, when should she consult a lactation consultant regarding breastfeeding? Because there are a lot of myths, there's a lot of confusion. Personally, being from the medical paramedical background, I did not have that much of information regarding lactation and breastfeeding, and
Yeah,
when I had my baby, I was just clueless, and it gave me more anxiety, not knowing anything. Why is this happening?
yeah.
So when should pregnant lady or an expecting mother, should she come before delivery or after delivery to you?
So I think first of all, when I got into this area of work about 13 years ago, in India, I'm not talking about Ireland, but in India, there were no lactation counselors in each and every city. But now there are a lot of lactation counselors in each city. There are at least one or two, and even hospitals, some good ones, especially the ones that are focusing on births. They are keeping lactation counselors.
Yeah,
So ideally, those lactation counselors should have a prenatal breastfeeding education class.
that's so important.
Right. So that's not happening. They have lactation counselors on board, but they have it more as a reactive measure rather than a proactive measure. So they do have people who come in later seeking support with breastfeeding, but not before. But
Right.
in case they do have that prenatal class, people need to prioritize that class and attend that class. And before the baby comes along, get references for a good lactation counselor or enabler in your city.
Right.
So, in case you're not able to breastfeed, it's okay to seek support because ideally, breastfeeding was not actually, it's not instinctual or anything, it's actually learned. So we were supposed to learn about breastfeeding from our didis, nanis, dadis, bhabis, etc. But now when we're living in a nuclear setup, that system has totally collapsed.
Right.
And then
But
what happens is women feel like failures if breastfeeding is not working out. And we keep saying this on our group that if breastfeeding is not working out and if you're not able to breastfeed, it's never the mother's fault. So, first of all, throw that guilt out of the window because it's not your fault you're not able to breastfeed. You don't have your village.
no, it's expected that a mother should naturally know how to breastfeed, and I don't know why.
Exactly. There was this very interesting case study now. I mean, about, I think it was a orangutan, or I think one of the I think orangutan. I'm not a monk. I think it was an orangutan or a monkey, but one of the species. One of those species. I think she gave birth in a zoo, and she had no idea what to do with the baby after because she hadn't seen anyone breastfeed.
Yes.
So she didn't know, like, what am I supposed to do with the baby? Am I supposed to bring it to the breast? There was no she didn't know how to do that. And unfortunately, the baby didn't survive. And the second time
Oh,
round, they surrounded that cage with mother's breastfeeding.
oh,
So then that primate saw that, okay, this is what I need to do. Then brought the baby to the breast. So what I'm saying is that you are not
wow,
supposed to
how
figure this
beautiful.
out alone, you know?
True.
So you don't have to feel like a failure, breastfeeding is not working out. And what happens is sometimes the psyche is such that if you've had a cesarean birth, you
Mm-hmm.
some people say the darnest of things, like you couldn't even give birth to your baby. Like, what kind of woman are you?
Yeah.
So, if you're in that kind of a negative energy circle and you've given birth to a cesarean and you're being told, oh, what kind of woman are you? And then you're
Mm-hmm.
not able to breastfeed, then you feel, what a failure I am. I can't even feed my baby.
Yeah, many women feel that way.
Yeah, so it's really not fair to the women. So it's better to keep the number handy. First,
Mm.
educate yourself, and even if you educate yourself, and I did educate myself on breastfeeding, honestly, but it was not to a very great extent like hypoglycemia. If someone like literally just given birth and
Mhm.
had a really bad tear, and I was getting stitched up, and the nurse comes and whispers in my ear that your child is hypoglycemic. Should I give a feed? And at that point of time, I was like, obviously, don't starve my child. But in
True.
hindsight, I learned and I educated myself that it was unnecessary. Had they just let me feed my baby, then it wouldn't have happened.
And most mothers don't know that, you know.
Yeah, yeah. See,
Out of
it's the
that
whole.
pressure, they
Yeah, yeah.
do
See, if
tell
you're
them to
going to
give the
ask your
formula.
mother, if you ask a mother, shall I starve your baby? Or, like the whole baby's in distress,
Yes.
like, shall I, your baby's going to die, if you don't opt for a
Yeah.
cesarean. The
Yeah.
mother's not going to be like, no, 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 no. I'm going to still have a natural or vaginal birth.
Right.
So in those situations also, it's a very panic, negative mode. Like, hey, a
Mm-hmm.
baby can't survive. Should we give formula? Of course, give formula.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's really important to educate yourself about breastfeeding, one. Second, choose a place which is supportive of breastfeeding because these are not in your hands.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What if someone comes and whispers in my ear, your child has hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar? We've measured it. Obviously I'm going to say give formula.
Mm-hmm.
So the center has to be protective of breastfeeding if possible.
Right. Makes sense.
Because that's not in my hand, no? Like similarly, like even with respect to vaginal versus cesarean births, they say jhadu pocha maro and do all that. None of that's going to matter. What
Yeah.
is going to matter at the end of the day is whether your chosen gynecologist supports vaginal and births with least interventions. None of it is going to matter.
That's
So
true.
it's important really to select those medical professionals who are on your team.
Makes sense. Yeah. That actually makes a lot of sense.
So please get educated about breastfeeding. Please get that number beforehand. And it's okay to seek support. Be unabashed. Tell your, if your husband or your partner is living with you, like, look, I'm giving you this number. And if it's not working and if I'm not the mental state, please just go call this person. It's fine. It's actually an investment in the well-being of the mother and the baby. Right?
Yeah.
If breastfeeding is going to work out, it's going to be good for the mother and it's going to be good for the baby. And it's okay to take that support.
Yeah, actually, because I'll tell you what, breastfeeding is a very exhausting, process also for a mother. Like the endless
Very
sleepless,
trying, right? You're
yeah,
just,
because endless
yeah,
sleepless nights, you feel all alone. You're feeding your child alone at night, and even during the day, multiple times, it can be very exhausting. So, in
yeah.
this, how do you think a partner can help his wife in the breastfeeding journey, supporting the breastfeeding mother?
Yeah. So I think in most traditional setups, the woman really goes back to her parents' house,
Yes,
which wasn't the case with me because, I was living in another country
yes,
and my mom had come there. So my husband was also there when, when my son was small. And I think some of the little things that the father can really do is you can't breastfeed, but you can do everything else.
exactly. Change the diaper.
Everything. You can literally do everything else. When I was a parent of my first child, I took great pride, in saying I didn't have a choice. That was a different thing. But, like, it's like how Aishwarya and I said that, no, I'm not hiring a nanny. So, we somehow take pride in the fact that we don't need support. But it's
Yeah,
okay to take that support. It's temporary.
true. I don't know why is it patronized if a mother does
Yeah,
everything
yeah. It is
alone
just,
and then
and
feels
with my
horrible about
second
it.
one, I didn't have a nanny, but for before we moved abroad again, for a short while, we had someone for my child. And she
Mm-hmm.
could make the baby sleep and she could feed the baby. And I was like, oh my God, I'm such a different mother this because of that.
Totally
Right? Because
different
if you're
journey.
totally different, right? Because she can feed her egg and she, this is after 6 months, and
Mm.
she could literally make her sleep. And I was like, oh my God, I'm knitting a sweater. So it was literally like that. So I
Yeah.
think it's okay to take that support. It's not like, all your life you're going to need that kind of support. It's exhausting. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, at that point of time, I also had an older child. So the dynamics were a bit different. But it's okay to, if you have the funds, it's okay to take that paid support also.
Right.
If the someone else can bathe the baby and you can sleep, forget about everything else. If you can catch a nap for an hour or two without the baby, you'll be a much better mother.
True. True.
And you will have the patience to breastfeed as well. So if you have the resources, there's nothing to take personal that, oh my God, I hired a house help or I hired a nanny to help me with the child. Because it's in a joint family, I'm just saying, there would always be someone holding the baby, taking the baby out for a walk, or, in the traditional setup, you would not be confined in the house with just the baby and no one to talk to and just be in isolation.
Yes, that's right.
There are in a traditional community like setups, there are 7 8 children playing together.
Yeah, joint
And
families
now,
also together, all cousins
yeah,
together.
whatever would be the dynamics between the sisters-in-law and brothers and all the that apart, the kids were playing with each other or fighting with each other. They were not like waiting for the mother to move, like pick me up and all. They were after the kids.
Right.
So again, like from a very social, and like an experimental kind of way, it's all become an increase in the burden for the mother.
Hmm. And that can be really exhausting too.
So this constant mama, 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 when there is no one else to play with, is
True.
greater odds, right? Because a child wants to play with other children.
Mm-hmm.
But now when there are no other children to play with, the load is on the mom. So
Right.
even if you can hire someone to, take the child down for a walk or, pick up some leaves or some pebbles, it still gives you that time to catch up on your nap and then you'll be able to breastfeed longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Versus when you're exhausted, like, of course, if you're like running on low sleep for months, you're going to be running on a very, very low battery and you're going to be like, I'm done with this.
Right. Yeah. It is actually very common for most mothers to feel worn out, burnt out, all of that.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously you're not really yourself. A lot of those hormonal transitions are taking place, and depending on the kind of vibrations you're in,
Yeah.
it can impact you, right? Whether the people around you are being supportive, and you're not able to pick yourself up and say, "No, I don't care about this. I'm not getting impacted by this."
Right.
You're in this very vulnerable state hormonally. So I think it's really important, like, in traditional setups, again, in good ones, again, there are exceptions to every rule. Like, even like my mother used to say that you should never, you have to be very careful around a mother who's just given birth
Hmm.
because she's very emotionally vulnerable. And these are, traditions that are passed down. I mean, it doesn't make sense to be around the husband, to be completely honest, because the husband doesn't know what that is. It's not that he doesn't mean well.
Yeah.
He just thinks that she's the same woman who was my girlfriend once and who's, or, my whatever
Not much
fiance.
has changed for him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not much has changed. And she's like, okay, why is she crying when I said something which I would say and it wouldn't impact her?
Yes.
Right? For her, it's like, what? Okay, you popped a baby out. So now what? So in very short summary, what I want to say is that if you want your child to be well taken care of, take care of the mother.
Mm-hmm.
The child will automatically get taken care of, right? So give her that warm water, allow her to pee, so elementary. Because sometimes the child is so clinky, you can't pee, and you're like, really elementary things like, how do I hold the baby and pee? Like,
Yeah.
really those kind of questions, right? So, really enable her to find that rhythm between her and the baby, but take care of her, take
Right.
care of the mother.
Also, I feel like the basics, like for a mother to go for a shower, to go to the bathroom, that feels like luxury doing it without a child being around or
Yeah.
crying, like, for the mother. So allowing the mother to do that is also a great thing.
I changed the kind of clothes I would wear to sleep because I could, more easy access to pee, was more like a requirement. Because, like I said, I was living in another country. I was like alone sometimes, days
Mhm.
at end with my son.
Oh,
because
okay.
my husband's a doctor, and then he would be away for like on calls for like 3 days at a stretch sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was crazy because there was only me and him, and
Okay.
literally doing everything. And it was like if I didn't cook food, there would be no food to eat. And that kind of really elementary struggle.
Uh-huh.
So, whatever that can be done. And then on weekends, like I would just tell him, look, you go for a walk with him. I need to sleep, just because. And I would tell him to go out because I would think that he's crying. I would
Mm-hmm.
imagine he's
Yeah.
crying. So I literally used to tell him, okay, he's had his feed, go out now for a walk. I need to sleep for 2 hours. So, like, those kind of things can really, help in keeping the mother going. Otherwise, it's really not possible to,
Right.
go on.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, coming back to breastfeeding, Adhunika, is there any advantage of breastfeeding over formula feeding? Because it is a tedious process, of course. But, for a mother to know that, yeah, breastfeeding is actually more beneficial for her child, I think the mother will do whatever is the best for the child, right? So, is there anything that breastfeeding is more superior than formula feeds or anything like that?
Yeah. So we actually never say that breastfeeding is better than formula feeding. We actually say that formula is, has risks
Okay.
because biologically the baby was supposed to get nurtured. Like when you look at a pup,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be like, oh, you can't expect that pup to get milk from a buffalo and suckle at, the udder of a buffalo, or somehow reach the breast of a giraffe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the biologically appropriate way for a human to feed is feeding through the breast
Yes.
of its mother.
Mhm.
So not feeding through the breast comes with some amount of risks. So
Like.
within that risks also, it's not like it's not very absolute, right?
Mhm.
So whenever there is some fact sharing video on breastfeeding on Instagram, then there'll be like 1,000 people saying, I was given formula, I turned out fine, I was given formula.
Yeah.
So of course you can turn out fine because there are many risks, and not breastfeeding increases those risks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now, when there is so much of talk about processed foods, refined sugars, so like getting refined sugars and even artificial sugars every 2 hours,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
even as an adult, what impact is it going to have on you? And then imagine a newborn baby.
Yeah. It's too much for
Packaged
them.
product.
Mm.
What are the safety guidelines? There are so many cases where, formula is retracted.
I know. I've read a few.
So r- basically, not breastfeeding comes with risks to the baby and to the mother. So there are a lot of risks of not breastfeeding. It's of course starting with diabetes, hypertension. There's a whole huge list of them that not breastfeeding increases the odds. So it's not like just because the child has getting formula, the child 100% will have diabetes, right? Because everything is
Mm-hmm.
multifactorial.
Right.
So you grow up and maybe you start fasting, you start going to the gym, and you fix your diet and don't eat junk. Of course, you'll be able to undo the damage that has been given, but it doesn't change the fact that it increases the odds,
Mm-hmm.
of the child developing like diabetes, hypertension, ear infections, some sorts of cancers in the mother also are increased if the mother does not breastfeed.
Okay. And are there any advantages of breastfeeding? Like one thing that I've heard is,
Yeah, there are so many advantages of breastfeeding.
yeah,
I mean, I can
in
go on.
terms of immunity for the baby, we were
Yeah.
talking about it earlier.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's literally like magical because the way the baby suckles at the breast, there are receptors that send a signal to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the once this suckle reflex, and all of the bacteria or viruses that the child is exposed to, the
Hmm.
mother is also exposed to those exact bacteria if the mother and child are not separated, right? So of course when the mother when the child is is away from the mother, then the suckle will work. But in case the mother and the child are always together, the exact condition that the baby is dealing with, the child is going to get very hyper specific
Mm-hmm.
antibodies for that condition through breast milk.
Okay. Wow. That's very interesting.
So when there was COVID, and it was a new virus and the first of its kind, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
there was some tests done, and mother's milk did have antibodies specific to that virus.
Oh.
So
Wow.
that's how natural selection was before vaccinations came into the picture. It's that if a child is breastfeeding and the mother and child are exposed to something, the baby would automatically get those antibodies
So it's
through
like
the
the first
mother's milk,
vaccine that you can give to your baby.
literally. And some may even say that possibly the only ones that they need because it's whatever they're
Wow,
exposed to.
interesting.
And it's hyper specific to that
Yeah.
situation, right? So
Hmm.
that's how it really works because there were so many before modern medicine, it was literally the only way the child would survive.
Right.
And in some places where there is no access to clean water, if you
Mm-hmm.
need formula, and there was this case study that was done in Philippines, and why there's so much of conversation about Nestle being an unethical company. They went to the Philippines
Mm-hmm.
and they went to this urban poor area and they distributed formula for free, saying that it was superior.
Okay.
Then those free formula samples got over,
Huh.
and then those people did not have money to buy formula.
Oh
But their
my.
breast milk supply had already dipped because we all know that the more you feed your baby, the more you drain your breast, more milk you're going to make. But
Yeah.
when the breast is not getting drained and you have started giving formula to your child, it automatically means that your supply will come down. And in
Hmm.
those situations, they didn't have access to clean water.
Oh.
So it actually literally physically caused infant deaths
Oh my God.
because
That's
there was no
horrible.
clean water to give formula, right? So
Hmm.
this is the reality. And even in there are some studies about formula that is, when you're using water, whatever contaminants are there in the water is directly going to the baby. There's no filtration system.
Yeah.
So there are many such aspects with respect to health and environment where it is optimal for the mother to be feeding directly from the baby to be feeding directly from the mother. So anything less than that is suboptimal. So we can't compare formula feeding to breastfeeding because not breastfeeding has risks. Breastfeeding has no risks. There are a
True.
lot
I've
of
never
things,
heard
the
of
way the
any.
baby suckles at the breast, the way it shapes your jaw
Mm-hmm.
versus you suckle at a bottle. How does that shape your jaw, your
Yes.
nasal passage, your palate, your jaw, malocclusions? There's a huge list
Yeah,
for
I've heard
anyone
it
who wants to
myself.
look
A
it up.
lot of pediatricians also say don't give a bottle to the baby because their dentition, their oral cavity will be
Yeah.
affected. That's
Yeah,
something that
but
even
there,
I've
I
heard of.
still know of people who choose to give bottles even after the doctors say don't do it. So,
Yeah.
like I said, it's because it's the personal choice because maybe
Right.
they don't have time or maybe they think that they'll take that risk because, like I said, everyone's not going to suffer from that.
Hmm. True.
So it's all increased risk, and it's also your priorities with respect to that, right? If you think that okay, I'm doing everything else, the odd time I give a bottle, I don't want to feel guilty about it.
Okay.
So whatever works. So I'm not here to judge anyone, but there are risks to formula feeding and there are risks to bottle feeding.
Okay.
And breastfeeding directly is great for the mother. It's great for the baby as well. And in mothers, it reduces the odds of several types of cancers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously,
Yeah.
breast cancer being one of them, but there's also ovarian cancer and cervical cancer because I read this somewhere that nature has designed a female body to give birth.
Yeah.
So, if you choose not to have a child, that also increases the risks for a woman. Ironic, you know. Again, it increases the odds. So, we really can't be saying that 100% if you don't have a
Hmm.
child or you don't breastfeed,
But
your child will
definitely,
have X.
the odds are
It's all
more.
increased. It's all increased odds basically. So, what we can do is we can educate ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and then take a decision on, the greater well being of the mother and the baby. That's what we can do.
Right. Adhanika, what are the most common challenges or barriers that most women experience while breastfeeding and they have like reached out to you for it? Like, for example, I hear many people saying, oh, we've got the breast engorgement and, mastitis is something. I was reading about that. So, what are the most common challenges that you have seen in breastfeeding mothers and how do you tackle them?
I think when we started off the group, one of the most frequently asked serious questions was formula has been introduced.
Mm-hmm.
How do we wean off it? Right? So, like, for example, if you're going home with like a dabba of formula,
Mm-hmm.
and in the hospital itself, you've been told to give 30 ml of formula every 2 hours.
Right.
Right. And that time they will say that it was introduced because a baby had not gained weight. But was the baby measured on the same scale?
Hmm.
Right.
That
And what were
nobody
the
checks.
other so these are all questions that come into play, and a lot of, unfortunately, the medical professionals now, of course, I've been, like I said, I've been doing this over a decade. There is a transition. There are doctors who are aware of breastfeeding,
Mm-hmm.
but this is something the doctor is supposed to know.
Yeah.
Right. So we always would get those kind of questions because they would say that our supply was not enough because our baby had not gained weight. And then we started giving formula. So the first question we asked, like, but did you have a medical issue
Mm-hmm.
that caused you or the baby not to have enough milk? Like, did you have okay, if you had a medical issue, maybe you don't have, thyroid that's within control. If there is a real medical issue because of which you are having genuine low milk supply, that is different. But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a genuine low milk supply situation, then why was formula introduced to begin with?
Right.
Right. So then we talk about how to wean off formula. So that's one of the questions that is asked the most. And second is, I think every time the baby is feeding often, the mother feels that my milk supply is inadequate. So, it's just like the baby was feeding all the time. That means my breast was not making enough milk. So, we started formula. And, my mother or my mother-in-law, said that you're not making enough milk. And there are some horror stories also. Like on the group, like the child is getting snatched by the mother-in-law and saying that, as a mother, you don't know about this. I know better. And snatching the baby from the mother and giving formula. So it's like, like they mean well, but they don't really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of, what is not really a true sign of low milk supply is important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think it's easiest to track the wet nappies and the dirty nappies.
Okay.
Because you are going to go to the pediatrician's office at like select durations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And at those specific durations is when you will find out what is the weight.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're constantly second guessing yourself, then track the wet nappies.
Yeah.
If the baby has adequate pee and poop counts, then you don't have to measure the baby.
Mm-hmm.
You know that what is going in is finding its way out.
Yeah.
So you don't have to
baby has
second guess
something in
yourself.
its tummy. That's why they are
That's
pooping and peeing, right?
because it's consuming it, it's coming out. No, if it was not going in,
Yeah.
then how would it go out? So I think feeding often, sometimes the baby can feed for hours at a stretch.
Cluster feeding.
Hours.
Yeah.
And it is also, because whenever there's some sort of a developmental leap or a growth spurt where the child is going to start doing something soon, like their vision will become clear, or they start recognizing you, or, they start exploring their hands and legs at different developmental milestone, which, you're the expert in. So, every time there is some sort of a developmental leap that's going to take place, the baby starts feeding often.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that you, like, if the baby is feeding often, I want to say it's not an indication that the baby is not getting enough. So just track the wet nappy and dirty nappy count.
And it's normal for the baby to feed often and for longer duration.
Absolutely normal. It's really, really normal.
Nowadays, most working mothers, they have to resume their work after the 6-month mark post-delivery. So in that case, how should a mother breastfeed her child? And if that's not possible, because, most mothers don't even have the work from home provision. So what are the alternatives to breastfeeding in that case?
Yeah. So, technology has come a long way now today. So she can try her hands with hand expression first, because if you're conscious of the environment and you don't want to buy another electronic product, then you can try your hands at hand expression. But for whatever reason, even if you're conscious of the environment, if it's not working out for you, it's okay to invest in a double electric pump, because you can really sell it later, and you can also get a higher yield in a shorter duration of time, because the double electric pump will really pump both the breasts together.
Okay.
So if you're going to be away for 9 to 10 hours in a day, you have to make sure that the time that you were going to feed the baby is when you will have to be expressing milk at your workplace. Then you carry that milk back, and then you can offer that milk to the baby. Now, if you're using a bottle, there is a technique called paced bottle feeding, which kind of sort of mimics the breast. So the milk is not directly just flowing into the baby's mouth, as there's no bottle and nipple confusion. Alternatively, if you do have those 6 months, you can even use something like a shot glass, or, like those measuring cups to feed the baby. Just make sure you, yeah. like a
Okay.
normal shanta. So
Okay.
then you shouldn't be pouring it, because then the child should not get lazy at the breast.
Yeah.
Because now if it's getting it too quickly, then the child may feel, I don't want to suckle at the breast. So it is possible to use bottles, not use bottles, to use a pump, to not use a pump. But you really have to work alongside your employer to find out if there's a place where you can express your milk.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And Adunika, what is the role of diet or nutrition in terms of breast milk production or breastfeeding? Because one thing that I've heard is, oh, don't have this, it can cause gas in the baby, or have this, isse breast milk badhega. So, can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit
So
about
both of them are actually true. But again, there's no one size fits all. So there are some mothers, some babies who are impacted by what their mothers consume. Like I have experienced both.
Mm-hmm.
My older child was impacted by what I ate. And again, it's not for the entire duration of your breastfeeding journey, it's for the initial few months.
Okay.
So being very rebellious, I was like, no, no, this is all hearsay. And, then when I did have something with a high protein content, it did
Mm.
impact my son adversely. So it really depends on the baby also. So and some babies are impacted, and if they are impacted, you can avoid the common, high protein foods, which is like tur dal, rajma, chana. Some
Mm-hmm.
babies can have some trouble with groundnuts, even cow's
Mm-hmm.
milk, which is a known allergen which passes through breast milk. So these
Okay.
are, yeah. So these are things that can irritate the gut of some babies,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of births today do come with antibiotic consumption, and that also has a role to play in the development of the gut of the baby. So
Okay.
when you consume antibiotics, the child also consumes it through the milk, and of course there was no other way, so you had to consume it.
Yeah.
But it can impact the gut of the baby. So some babies, to keep it short, some babies are impacted. So if your baby is impacted, then try to understand what it is that's adversely impacting the child. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's not impacting, then of course you can go ahead and have what you have. In case there is a genuine low milk supply issue, there are herbs like methi seeds, fennel
Mm-hmm.
seeds, and sometimes even yeast and oats and things like that can
Mm-hmm.
genuinely help. But I would say this is more important for those mothers who maybe dropped their pumping sessions, or they've
Yeah.
dropped their breastfeeding sessions, and they want to pick them up again. But if
Right.
you're just feeding on demand throughout, or draining your breast
Mm-hmm.
frequently, then you don't really need any of these things.
Right.
Because sometimes having too much of this can also come with their consequences, which is like, again, causing too much of breast milk production, engorgement, plug ducts, and things like that. So
Yeah.
it's not something that everyone should be consuming, but if you are dealing with issues, then you can consider consuming some of these.
Oh, interesting. Right. Okay. Now, coming to the end of the breastfeeding journey, where we're going to talk about weaning the breastfeed, something that most mothers are worried about and they're scared of. It's the most dreadful thing. So, when is the right time to wean breastfeeds? And how do you suggest, like, a gentle way to wean the breastfeed?
When the mother should wean is a decision that should be entirely and purely taken by the mother. you know
Mm-hmm.
so some mothers, they choose to breastfeed until the child is ready to stop
Right.
themselves. So that could be anywhere between 3 to 4 to 7 and 8 years of age as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, to provide for such a long time is no easy feat, so you have to keep making sure that your needs are being met, or making sure that you yourself are prioritizing your needs to thereafter meet the needs of the child. But at whatever point of time, if you feel that you're done, and you've done a great job and now you're done, then you need to gradually stop feeding, because if you're going to suddenly stop feeding, then it can again cause plug ducts engorgement, increase the odds of developing breast cancer, because again, it's abrupt. So
Yeah.
if you want to start weaning, then gradually start reducing your feeds.
Mm-hmm.
And however you want to do that, if you're away from the child for a specific amount of time, then another care provider can then offer solids or water, pacify the baby, rock the baby, and things like that, and very very
Yeah.
very gradually reduce the feeds.
So don't go cold turkey. Most people do
Don't go
that.
cold
I've heard,
turkey. Yeah.
especially the night feeds. I've heard so many people like, oh, all of a sudden they've stopped it, and then they've also they bear the consequences.
Yeah, it's not good for the mother. See, the baby,
Yeah.
okay, let's say that the baby is a fighter and will come out of that. So that's fine. But this is more in the better interest of the mother,
Hmm.
that, the weaning is gradual.
Okay.
And we have information on how you can do gentle weaning on our website, www.bsim.org.in. So we have like 65 topics which are available there for free, which can be translated into 10 regional languages of our country, which is completely free. So you can always go to our website, www.bsim.org.in, and there is also a weaning conversation there. And we also have like, detailed information on how do you know if the baby is getting enough milk, how to position the baby, how to attempt to deep latch, and all of that information is available for free on our website.
Wonderful. I think everyone should check that out.
Thank you.
All right. Before we wrap up this podcast, it's time for a quick myth or fact round. Okay, it'll be like a rapid fire. I'll say a statement and you tell us instantly whether it's a myth or a fact. Okay,
Yeah.
shall we begin?
Yes.
Okay. First, breast size determines milk supply. Myth or fact?
Does not determine milk supply. You can
Okay.
feed with smaller breasts as well.
Newborns need to be woken up every 2 hours for daytime feeding.
Babies need to be woken every 2 hours until they regain their birth weight when measured on the same scale.
Okay.
After that, you can feed on demand.
Interesting. Colostrum is too little, so baby needs top-up formula. Is that true or a myth?
Absolutely false. Colostrum is all the baby needs until the milk increases in volume or mature milk comes in.
Okay. Pain while breastfeeding is a normal thing.
Absolutely not. Pain while breastfeeding should not be tolerated and latch must be improved ASAP. Breastfeeding should never ever be at the personal cost of the mother's health.
Okay. Pumping is the only way to find out how much is your milk supply.
Pumping is the worst way to find out how your milk supply is because a pump cannot mimic the way the baby transfers milk. And a lot of times, mothers just pump one random time and they say, my milk supply is only 20 ml. So, first of all, your milk output through a pump is going to be the highest when breastfeeds are replaced by pumping sessions. So, random pumping session with a pump, whether you don't know it works for you or not, is never ever an indication of your milk supply. You need to be pumping on a schedule with a pump that works for you and replace it with breastfeeds to get the highest milk supply. And I think this is one of the biggest queries we deal with today because everyone is buying a pump and everyone at random is like, I can't pump because I could not pump and I've breastfed for years. So it really is not an indication of how much milk you're making.
Interesting. Okay. Breastfed babies, they wake up more frequently at night. True or not?
It could be true, but then in case there is a developmental leap and the baby is waking up often, if the child is not breastfed, then you'll have to find alternate ways to make the baby sleep. So if you can just give your breast and the baby will go back to sleep, but if the baby is not being breastfed, then you may need to rock the baby, shush the baby, pat the baby, do all of those myriad of things to make the baby fall asleep when the child is not breastfed. So some people think I'll wean off and then it'll be easier. But babies, they do wake up, frequently until they're 2.5 or 3.5 at night. And earlier you were just offering your breast, and now you stop offering your breast, and you have to do, other compensatory, maybe more exhausting tasks. Yeah, but then maybe the father can take that up, So it really depends on your personal situation.
Okay. And the last one, you can't get pregnant while breastfeeding.
You 100% can because for 6 months, there are several criteria for the lactation amenorrhea, which is when you don't get pregnant when you're breastfeeding. One of that is that the baby should be less than 6 months of old, should never receive bottles, should be breastfeeding on demand every 2 to 3 hours. And even then, there is, I think, a 97%, which is, still very high. But after 6 months, it's not a sure shot. So if you're 100% sure that you don't want to get pregnant when you're breastfeeding, then you need to take additional precautions to make sure that you don't get pregnant. And many of women have gotten pregnant thinking that they're not going to get pregnant when they're breastfeeding.
That's lovely. Now, this was a very incredibly insightful podcast. But before we sign off, can you tell us a little bit about BSIM and about the courses that are available on BSIM? And even there are few free resources for women to read. So, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so on BSIM, we actually have a few pre-recorded webinars on how, like, basics of breastfeeding, for example. If you don't have an antenatal class close to you, just, you can attend one of ours where we've covered everything that a mother needs to know before the baby comes along. There's also how to wean off formula, there's mother-led weaning. There are a lot of topics when it's pre-recorded. The free resources, like I previously mentioned, we have like 65 topics on our website that can be translated into 10 regional languages of India. And apart from that, we have courses on lactation, which can help you become a lactation enabler. You can help your friends and family, or you can take up lactation counseling more professionally, or you can even work in a hospital. So these are some of the options. Like because when I became passionate about breastfeeding, I felt I wanted to learn about breastfeeding, but there weren't, any courses in the Indian context at that point of time. So, these are the courses that we've come up with, and they're very, very thorough and they're very well researched. So, if there's anyone who wants to consider doing the course, they can consider it. All of the information is again available on our website, www.bsim.org.in, under courses.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And one takeaway message that you have for our audience?
I think one takeaway message is just be happy, with whatever you're doing, and everything will flow. Because the moment we start worrying and we start stressing, and then we surround ourselves with negativity, it becomes very difficult. So just be happy. Honestly, whether you're breastfeeding or formula feeding, just focus on being happy and being grateful for the child. And once you're in peace with that happiness, you can figure out what you want to do. But breastfeeding with hatred and breastfeeding with exhaustion is also not going to do you any good if it's going to
Yes.
cause you problems long term. So, and if you want to breastfeed, if that's the choice that you want, that's the route that you want to take, then make sure you get your support system in place. And there is, you don't have to become a martyr and sacrifice yourself at the altar or something like that, because there's no award at the end of the day. So if you want to
Right.
breastfeed, please do, but don't do it at your personal cost.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think very well said. A happy mother is a healthy mother and a healthy baby also.
Absolutely. If the mother hates herself when she's breastfeeding and she's exhausted, and she might be hitting the child because she's blaming the child for it, that's not going to be great for the
Yeah.
child either. So if you want to breastfeed, then make sure that you have enough support and information in place to reach your own breastfeeding goals.
All right. Thank you so much, Adhanika. What a wonderful session. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much, Samira. That was really wonderful.
Thank you.